space in Africa is a tug-of-war, with civic organizations and human rights defenders fighting against systems designed to kill activism and civic engagement. But what do we mean by the civic space? What are the elements? And why is it so important in conversations about modern society?
So the civic space is a people's ability to organize, to participate, and to communicate freely on issues without hindrance, communicate freely on issues that affect their political and social well-being.
ClosingSpaces.org and the Civicus Monitor are private platforms with reliable intelligence-based data on the nature of the civic space in Africa and the world. The Civicus Monitor provides credible ratings categorizing the civic space as open, narrowed, obstructed, repressed, and closed. ClosingSpaces.org provides data on the threat to the civic space in Nigeria and West Africa. While only 2 African countries operate in an open civic space, countries like Nigeria and Senegal's current ranking has been downgraded from obstructed to repressed. Ghana's civic space is currently narrowed with imminent threats to being downgraded.
And this is because of several factors. Some of these factors are basically like external happenings, things that are happening outside our boundaries but have national ramifications, and some are more internal issues. Of course, one of the key external issues is the impact of COVID-19 on our social and economic status as Ghanaians. We can see the upsurge of coup d'etats, what people have called the democratic retrogression, the violent extremism that is happening. There's been cases in Burkina Faso, in Benin, Nigeria, Togo, Mali, etc.
The civic space in Africa is shrinking, and here are a few trends to watch out for the year 2022. State actors will develop more covert ways to detain activists illegally without the fury of the public. There will be further efforts to censor digital and social media platforms, especially during the election season. Press freedoms will lose meaning in some countries. Governments will suppress independent media groups for selfish interests. According to Humango, 9 media houses have been attacked in West Africa between January to May 2022. Some African governments will restrict CSOs and their activities will be closely monitored. One example in Nigeria is the Company and Allied Matters Act and its provisions. Also, preventing or disrupting protests in Ghana and other nations.
Considering the kind of political temperature witnessed in 2015 and 2019, we believe that 2023, with the advancement in technology, we see that the consciousness level, like I told you, in 2021 was a year of consciousness. So with that consciousness, we are going to see more action, more civic activism, more digitivism, which is digital activism on digital spaces. We're going to see more conversations than even we had in 2015 and 2019. And we are going to also see how we are going to use technology to amplify some voices, amplify information and misinformation and propaganda that also that all those things that are associated with election season.
Well, I think the trends that are likely to happen is we're going to see a lot more spontaneous, organic movements begin to grow. Citizens-led movements that are going to be a little less dependent of professional NGOs. Citizens are tired. There's a lot going on in Nigeria currently. And I think of the NSAS movement as a prophetic movement of the kind of things we will see. And that's what I'm hoping to see. I think we'll see citizens beginning to also take their destiny into their own hands with the elections. We'll be a lot more vocal. We'll inculcate more organizing skills, and we'll seek to be heard more loudly. What I worry about is about the hearing, that if there's resistance to citizens being heard, that they may go to extremes to being heard. And I'm just hoping the political class will not push citizens that far.
I can give you some major civic space violations that have happened this year. So, for example, on the 8th, 10th, and 25th of February, there were the arrest of 3 different journalists, right? And these are pretty prominent journalists, Boama Beni, Kwame Bobi Ansa, and a person called Amenga Etego. And they were arrested and they were detained. And I think the reason they were arrested was not very clear, but I think it had to do with a certain broadcast that they made on their media stations. There's been disruption of protests. So what has happened is there's increasing frustration that's being meted out to citizens who want to protest. You know, when you want to demonstrate in Ghana, you have to get a license from the police, and sometimes the police refuse to give you the license. And if you look at the reasons why they refuse to give these licenses, in many times they're not really tangible reason.
One of the major threats to the civic space in 2022 remains government, repressive governments and governmental actions, the laws. So, for example, you've got the Companies and Allied Matters Act of 2020, which pretty much represses the activities of non-governmental organizations in Nigeria. That is still a threat in 2022. You've got the upcoming elections, which politically exposed persons would rather not have anyone participate in a meaningful manner or communicate about their choices, and so, of course, are seeking to repress it.
In Nigeria's electoral season, there is a sudden increased youth civic participation. They are motivated by the EndSARS agitation and are on a quest for good governance. This involvement has created a third force in the polity as they throw their weight behind their preferred candidate. PVC registration is at an all-time high as INEC declares that Nigeria has recorded about 11 million more voters than all registered voters of 14 West African countries. Nonetheless, there has been unconfirmed reports of systemic disenfranchisement of groups in the registration process by INEC officials and political party affiliates. INEC has promised to investigate reported incidences.
Nigeria is in a cliff anchor right now with the current political suspense ongoing with regards to the civic space. Will things get better? It will depend on the next set of political class that we're able to bring in. If we bring in the same set of people, it's likely that the repression will remain and may get worse. If we're able to bring in a new set and are able to socially negotiate what Nigeria's political terrain would look like, then perhaps things will begin to get better.
Advocacy is for a purpose, to influence social change in the positive direction. And for you to do that, people need to invest in data. We need to invest in intelligence gathering. We need to invest in evidence building, pattern analysis, trend mapping and analysis.
Democratic elections are a period of hope for citizens, so election trends begin to manifest and heightens as citizens cast their vote. The road leading to general elections is paved with maligning incidences as dominant political figures campaign for the right to occupy for the highest office of the land. During this period, the civic space is under threat. It is easily manipulated by political actors for selfish interests. Another threat to the civic space in 2022 looms as local and foreign media put their investigative skills to work as they scrutinize candidates vying for positions. Every word, actions, agenda, affiliations, and previous dealings are brought to light. Oftentimes, the outcomes of these investigations are mind-boggling, but are quickly debunked, and some journalists endure physical and judicial harassments.
There are two things. The first one is to understand that no right is absolute. So when you make claims, for instance, against a person, you need to be sure that those claims are accurate. because this is election season, a lot of politicians want to gain some mileage, and some capital more than their those in the opposition. So lots of sponsored misinformation, and that's in the sponsored misinformation. It happens. It's citizens that they use, and people should not allow themselves to be used, to spread rumors, to spread propaganda.
As we provide the 2022 Civic Space Outlook, we realize that it's the responsibility of every government, especially democratic ones, to have and support a healthy civic space. But these days, it's so easy to miss the mark. Here are a few essential pointers for governments to put in place if they are to operate in an open civic space. Stop arresting journalists at the slightest whim. Respect the Constitution and follow the rule of law always. Don't spy on your citizens, nor deploy surveillance infrastructure against marginalized population. Resist the move towards so-called digital sovereignty. Stop unlawfully requesting and manipulating user data from tech and finance companies. Do not unduly hamper the economic rights of individuals as punitive measures. Protect the right to freedom of assembly and do not quell peaceful protests with lethal force. Consult with policy experts on appropriate laws and human rights. Overreaching counterterrorism legislation must end. More private independent bodies and organizations need to emerge to monitor and hold the government accountable for its role in the shrinking civic space. As we monitor the civic space in Africa and viewing looming threats during elections, which may include internet shutdown, harassment of journalists, censoring media stations, and looming threats to frontline organizations and human rights defenders. This information is vital as citizens rise up to increase civic engagement and look forward to protect themselves from threats to the civic space.
So when advocacy is powered by intelligence, it's hard for you to get into trouble because under our laws, truth is a defense.